Welcome to this video in which we are going to discuss what is new in the upcoming release for Parallels RAS 19. With RAS 19, we continue to be focused on simplicity, flexibility, ease of use, and security. This applies to both the administrators and the end users alike. The overall goal for RAS is to be able to enable, whether it's enterprises, ISVs, MSPs, partners, to be much more agile in their service offerings and to be able to do everything from a single management console, a single pane of glass. So what we focused on specifically within RAS 19 are cloud integrations. We have a new application delivery method that is going to help not just deliver the applications, but also help with image management, enhanced security features. We have a new Parallels client, and we've updated the existing ones. And I've already talked about the superior administration and user experience, but we've taken the user experience especially to the next level. Before we get into all of the new features and updates, system requirements for the new version of RAS 19, we continue to support Windows Session Host 2008 R2 and upwards, and essentially everything else within here are updates to existing requirements. We have updated some of the terminology that we are going to be using when we talk about RAS 19 and within the documentation. So you can see here, things like publishing agent is now the connection broker. The HTML5 client, the web client, we're dropping the HTML from that naming convention. The HTML client portal will now be known as the user portal. In total, with RAS 19, we have 15 major new features that are being delivered within this version. This is just a quick summary of those. We will talk about each one of these as we go through the presentation. First up is our Amazon EC2 integration. We now have the capability to take an EC2 image and deploy that, the RAS template, allowing you to easily and quickly build out an environment within AWS. Along with that integration, we have the standard management that we have for Azure or AVD or even on premises, the auto scaling, ease of management. So really what this is bringing you is a single solution with a single pane of glass, able to deploy workloads on premises to AWS, to Azure, to AVD, all managed within one console, no having to bounce back and forth between different management consoles. The great thing about it is, just like everything else, this is all part of the license. There's no additional cost for running hybrid solutions like other vendors are charging. Parallels RAS 19 introduces our integration with Microsoft's MSIX App Attach. For those of you unfamiliar with App Attach, it is a technology Microsoft has developed that allows you to deploy applications to hosts dynamically. What that means is that the applications are not actually installed on your image. When a user logs in, those VHDXs are mounted to the host and they act and appear as if they were installed locally, not just to the end user, but also to Windows as well. The big advantage of App Attach is that because the applications are not installed onto your gold image, if you have to update an application, that can be done completely separate from the gold image. That allows you to keep your gold image pristine, You don't need to update it as often, which also means that you don't have to redeploy the image or take down your infrastructure to get those updates out to your end users. You could very easily have users log out, log back in. They have the new updated application. So a lot of time and effort is saved, not only from an application maintenance perspective or lifecycle perspective, but also from the time and effort it takes to update the images and get them pushed out into your infrastructure. Within the RAS console, we can help you manage the deployment of MSIX app attach packages. Through a wizard, we will help you import in the package information. And once that information is in the console, you can then use our filtering to determine which hosts will get the application and which users will be able to access those applications. Keep in mind, because these are app attach packages, they are not tied directly to a template. So a package can be deployed to multiple templates. A requirement of the MSIX packaging format, and therefore app attach as well, is that the packages must be signed. You can sign them using your own certificate authority, a public certificate authority, or even self-signed certificates. Parallels RAS can help you deploy the routes to the session hosts so that the packages will be trusted. If the certificate trust between the session host and the package cannot be established, the package will not mount and run, so you lose access to those applications. Parallels RAS within the console, we can help you deploy those certificate routes. We will also show you the expiry of the certificate that was used to sign the package. So you can keep track of when you have to renew the package and re-sign it with an updated certificate. Speaking of certificates, we have added support and integration for the management of certificates through Let's Encrypt. Let's Encrypt is a nonprofit certification authority that is run by the Internet Security Research Group, which in and of itself was put together by various companies like the Electronic Frontier Foundation, the Mozilla Foundation, University of Michigan, Akamai Technologies, and Cisco Systems, for people to be able to get free X509 certificates. So from within our console, you can create the request, get the issuance, and apply them, whether it's to the load balancer or the secure gateway automatically. We can automate the renewals, the issuance, the revocations, all of it from within the console. This is a huge benefit for smaller organizations that may not want to spend the money with the larger certificate authorities out there. This gives them the ability to have the security that certificates offer for free. Now, being able to get free certificates also helps accelerate trials, proof of concepts, pilots, and even speed up implementations, whether it's small enterprises up through large enterprises. Especially from the pilot and proof of concept standpoint in larger organizations, as we know, that typically involves having to go through different teams to get a certificate, and that can be time consuming. We have also added a new client to the family, the Windows ARM64 client. This expands our ability to support any device out there with a native client. We expect to see more ARM64 systems out there running Windows. Microsoft has released the Pro X, and HP, Lenovo, Samsung all have Windows ARM64 devices. With a native client, they get a full-featured Parallels Windows client and won't have to rely on only being able to access applications through the web client. And this allows legacy x86, x64 applications run on these devices. Again, this allows us to support natively many more devices that are in the market today, and what we expect will be even more on the market as time goes on. RAS 19 introduces expression-based filtering. This is a very powerful way of determining whether users have access to resources or not. These rules can be applied to the published resources, to policies, logon restrictions, MFA enforcements, what have you. Very powerful in that a rule is made up of a set of conditions. And those conditions, if they're met, they can either allow the user access to the resource or a deny. The way it works in practice is that each rule is evaluated from top to bottom. Multiple rules can be assigned to a resource. So if a user hits an allow on the first rule, the rest of the rules are not evaluated. So even if there is a deny later on, that is never evaluated because they were allowed before the deny rule was evaluated. Want to keep that in mind when using these, that once you hit an explicit allow or an explicit deny, it will stop evaluating at that point in time. Now, the conditions can be based on a variety of things. User or group. Are they coming in through a certain gateway? IP address, device name. What is the client operating system? All those things can be put into a single rule to help determine the access and the policies that will be applied to the user session. For example, you could have a rule that evaluates a user. If they're on the corporate network, they can print. They can print from their session. If they are not on the corporate network, though, you have a rule that says, is not the IP scheme, then you could put a deny on that policy and not allow them to print. But you want to make sure you get those in the right order, to make sure that everything works smoothly. So that's just one example with policies, what you can enable, disable for the client side. Again, this also applies to published resources, what they have access to, what they don't have access to, depending on whatever number of conditions you want to be evaluated at the time of access. Now we have multiple MFA providers that can be supported within a single Parallels RAS environment. Previously, you would have to have multiple environments, one per MFA provider. Now you can have multiple MFAs, one environment, and have those different departments or companies or what have you have their own MFA provider. So really, this is about bringing everything together, again, into a single pane of glass to manage an entire environment. This also supports upgrading between providers. If you're on one and you decide that you want a different one in place of the original, then you can do that now within your environment, as opposed to having to go through and create a new environment to migrate over to. This is obviously very good for MSPs, ISVs, being able to support multiple MFAs based on customer need, all within the same deployment if need be. Again, all about single pane of glass. RAS 19 introduces power management. This is exactly how it sounds. It allows you to power on, power off existing session hosts. You can disable access beforehand. You can set them in the drain mode, different options depending on how you want that to happen. You could even just set up a reboot schedule for your session hosts. We can manage this on premises. We can do it in Microsoft Azure, Amazon EC2, and Azure Virtual Desktop as well. So we've got you covered across the board with this functionality. It's simple, yet powerful. Parallels RAS is built around the philosophy of making management and administration of remoting simple and easy for administrators. You don't have to be experts. This extends to the user experience as well. In addition to the web client, as well as the email configuration, which is the administrator sends out an email with instructions on where to download the executable, how to manually configure everything to connect to Parallels RAS. We now have a new feature called the email-based connection discovery. The email-based discovery is much simpler. All the user needs to know is their email address, and that's it. That will redirect them to the right URL and configure the client, and they are up and running in almost no time. No human error, no typos. All they got to do is put in their email address. From the backend perspective, this is simply a DNS record. You just put it in. When the client goes out and does the DNS resolution, it finds it, redirects the client to where it's supposed to go, and from there, completely self-configured. This is especially great in the current environment of remote working, hybrid employees that travel, what have you. As long as they install the client, they have the client, they can simply put in their email from wherever they're at. As long as they have internet access, obviously, they will be able to easily connect. Next up is logon hours restrictions. This enables the administrator to set up times that users cannot access their applications. There's many reasons why this may want to be done. It could be that you have maintenance windows and you want to make sure that nobody connects during the maintenance windows. Right to disconnect initiatives. Let people take the weekend off or their evenings and, don't give them a chance to try to get in and work. If a user is in when they are scheduled to not be connected, you can force their disconnect. You can notify them 15 minutes ahead of time, 20 minutes, an hour, and you can also allow them to extend their time. So it's not a 10 p.m., you're done. We're going to disconnect your session. And that's an important point, is that we will only disconnect the session. It does not log them off. What you want to keep in mind with this is that if you have the rules or the options of the disconnect and then log off within remote desktop services, that log off will still kick in. So if your log off is after half an hour of being disconnected, that log off will still happen. We are not stopping that or preventing that in any way. So when a user is disconnected by RAS, it is a disconnect, but the policy for the log off will still happen if that is enforced. One of the other things that you can do is if a user tries to access applications, you could hide the applications so they can't even see them when they pull up their application sets. And this uses the expression-based rules we talked about earlier to set these up so you can have any number of conditions that have to be qualified to allow or deny to go along with that. In previous versions of Parallels RAS, we do have URL redirection. This was open, and you would deny those URLs that you would not want to redirect to the endpoint. With specific URL redirection, it denies all redirection by default, and you can specifically put in which URLs you would like to redirect. In particular, this is great for the end user experience with Teams. If they get a link in an email for a Teams meeting, when they click on it, it redirects back to the endpoint and opens up the local Teams, and they connect and can do all the meeting and everything from there. So now what you have is the ability to allow all URL redirection and deny specific, or deny all and allow only specific. So those were the major new features of RAS 19. We also have smaller improvements and features. The RAS console itself, from a navigation standpoint and even a flow standpoint, we've consolidated the provider section so it's not spread across the various tabs, templates for each session host type, those types of things. Just make it more consolidated, easier to find everything and organize. Multiple NIC support, in particular for things like migrating from Citrix to Parallels RAS, if they're using provisioning services, PVS, within their environment, and they're using vDisks, which most everyone will be. We now support the multi-NIC configuration where they would have the streaming on one NIC and regular network traffic on the other. So now we can use that, which also means that you can use the same image that they're using to create the PVS images and have a faster migration path off of Citrix to Parallels RAS. Scale computing, 9.1. Granular administrator permissions. This one is great because not only can you grant access to applications to view, to modify, those types of things, you can now specify the applications, the specific applications you want certain people to have access to. So it's not an all or nothing permission now. And that's all throughout the management console. Just the applications are a great example. Parallels Client for Mac OS. We've updated with some great new features, dynamic resolution for window mode, better clipboard redirection, webcam support. The web client has been updated with new RDP codecs, performance improvements. iOS client, we've added full direction. In the Android client, we've modified it so that the iOS and Android are now the same type of folder redirection that we're doing here. This allows for the exchange of files between mobile devices and the remote computers and vice versa. We continue to build upon and improve our existing reports, and we've also added some new reports for monitoring of the logon experience, the logon duration, what contributed to the long or short duration. You will also be able to access historic data from the UX evaluator in predefined reports that will be available out of the box. And of course, updates to the PowerShell and REST APIs. Thank you for tuning in to the What's New in Parallels RAS 19 session. Please feel free to get in touch with us or visit parallels.com/RAS, RAS, to learn more and get early access to Parallels RAS 19.